Anything else on church and the messiness? No, one question is, people don't like Huddle. People don't like churches because, why can't I just do it by myself? It's a lot of chatter.
I understand.
Yeah, like what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think, okay, so going back to the reality that being part of a community is hard, right? I think it also goes back to our desire as human beings to want to be part of beautiful things, right? But you realize that with anything in life, right, like that cliche saying of like anything worth having is going to be hard. You're going to have to fight for it. So I think, so again, I remember a wedding that Pastor Gina officiated, and she was talking about how marriages that work are marriages that are worked on. And relationships that quote unquote work aren't necessarily because we're automatically compatible to each other and you happen to come to Pinnacle Village and our personalities just mesh. And from there on, it's going to be rainbows and happiness and sunshine always, right? Like you realize that maybe in those moments where you look at your relationship with another person, you know that the reason why you guys are close is because you've been through so much together where you were willing to fight. So again, I was sharing this with Altus in conflict because I believe that one of the ways that will really gauge a person's desire to be like Jesus is who you are when you're in conflict. And I know that's also one of the things that make it hard for people to want to commit to a church and think that it's okay to just grow in isolation because of the fear of what do you do when you're in conflict, right? So for me, when I'm in the disagreement with someone, like I have to also ask myself, like, am I just fighting with this person or am I fighting for them? And my end goal is to fight for you, because the reason why we're friends is not because I like anime and you like anime and I love K-pop and so do you. Like that's not like that's probably like the initial.
Who's your bias?
From which K-pop group?
Oh,
no!
You know what? Let's continue.
Let's not go down that rabbit hole. So it's not the fact that we have similar likes, like a club, like what you were saying, or that you're even playing the same sport, right? It's because you're headed towards the same direction. And I think what really binds the body of Christ together is Jesus and our faith. And amidst every conflict and conversation that I have where I'm like arguing with someone, like I have to ask myself, like what's your end goal, Amber? Like, why are you opening your mouth? Why are you exerting so much energy to just try to prove that you're right? Or why are you even trying in the first place? Are you just saying these things because you like to fight with people? Or are you fighting for them because you understand that the purpose for your relationship with this person is because God brought you together for something bigger than just even your own personal satisfaction in being in relationship with that person? So I guess my point is, like, when I look at my relationships in light of the big picture of eternity, of our desire to be like Christ, it helps a lot. And I have to remind myself, like, the moments where I ask God for deeper relationships and the Lord reminds me, didn't you want deeper relationships? Well, you can't have that apart from the deep work of fighting for your relationship with someone when your ego is hurt and you feel betrayed, or you feel like trust is broken and you're trying to figure out how to restore your relationship because it's not just about the two of you anymore. So I think, I learn a lot about what it means to be like Jesus when I'm fighting with someone.
Yeah, yes.
So, and I think, just the reality of how life is messy and how church is messy and people are messy. How do you know people are messy? Because you're also messy and I'm also very messy internally. Like, I also have so much that I'm still dealing with, and to approach every conflict by the grace of God, I think is really what sets the body of Christ apart.
True, agree.
Yeah, so.
That's a good point you brought up. I don't know if it was mentioned before. Like, having a goal. I guess not a lot of us understand that when it comes to church, even in church, there's a goal. Like, people, maybe we come to church without realizing there is a purpose and something to strive for. Like, we just come to church. my goal is to not fall asleep. That's, my goal is to like talk to people. Like we forget the goal of being part of the church is to to resemble Jesus in this world that we have today. Yeah, why do we have? Yeah, I remember like I think it was a book, Grant Skeldon, I forgot, but he was mentioning why there are thousands of churches in the world, and the changes is it's so little. Why are there hundreds of churches all over just Los Angeles, but it's still a city with corruption and homelessness and poverty and all these crimes that are happening? Like, what are the churches doing? And that really pained me, because I guess we as a church forget to be Jesus focused. It's all about, I don't know. I feel like some people just come to church to look for drama.
Oh,
It's like, who can I fight?
Oh.
It's like, not here, sir. You're in the wrong place. But maybe just out of the niceness of people that, I don't know. But yeah, I guess just forgetting that we are called to the body of Christ for a mission. That's why we go back to prayer. Even in church, I guess I want to say that if we're someone that is struggling in a fellowship, in a community, yeah, go back to prayer. Go back to Jesus. Go back to the scriptures where Jesus points us back to the community. As we point ourselves to Christ, like he points us back to the church, that he would fight for the church. Like that church is his bride. Like, and Josh is married. Like, you would die, right? You would die for.
Oh, he sure would.
He sure would.
Take a bullet.
I would.
He would. I have to marry him. He would.
Yeah, I mean, I would do it for my parents, my loved ones. Like, how much all the more as Jesus would call his church his body. Like, how much we take care of our bodies, how much Christ would do it for his bride, and he called that his church.
Yeah. I love so much how you were saying that Jesus points us to people, other people. So I struggled with this topic before, maybe 5-6 years ago. To be really honest, I kind of had, my struggle is, I think people are right in a sense that, yeah, why would I go to church? There's so much conflict. It's so messy. So I'll just grow on my own, just read the Bible on my own. I'll just pray on my own. And why even go to church? Because people in church are hypocrites. They say one thing, but they do another thing. So why go through all that? So I really did struggle in that area, and yeah, why do go to church?
Yeah. You ever feel
right?
that? As a pastor, you're you're
right?
supposed to defend the church, but you're like, I agree with you.
Yeah, exactly.
What do I feel?
Yeah, exactly. But then you're so right. Jesus points us to people. Jesus even God himself is in community. And so what really helped me, I think it was Scott Souls in one of his books when he was saying, going to love, right? Going to love. If you love the person, you will love what the person loves too. So if you're really a Christian, a person that says, I love God, it's impossible not to love what he loves.
Yes.
And what does he love? He loves people. So that was really helpful for me, that if you really do say that you love God, then you will love what he loves.
Yes.
And he loves the church. The church is his bride, as you said. Yeah.
Can I add another thing on the hypocrisy?
Yeah.
Maybe because I know that with a lot of millennials and Gen Z, hypocrisy is something that maybe because we're a generation that longs for authenticity, and the joke always is the trust issues of this generation is just difficult for us to trust people and groups of people. So I think it was Erwin McManus too who was sharing, he was addressing this question of hypocrisy in the church, and he kind of redirected the question in such a way where he was saying what if it's not so much about us pinpointing the presence of hypocrites in the church, as it is more about understanding that when you spend more time in the presence of God, you understand that you're also a hypocrite, and that we're all hypocrites in progress. And it was really hard to take. Hypocrites in progress.
Yeah.
And we all have gaps in our lives that we're trying to bridge. So that was important for me in the times where I start to become Pharisaic and prideful, and I start pinpointing, and maybe there's validity. And I would like to be like what you were saying. I think it was important that for us as churches to ask for forgiveness in the moments where we did not deal with issues in the way that did not reflect the love and grace of God, which of course throughout history there are many, and we see that many times now in the modern era. But I think just being able to acknowledge that the more you become like Christ, the more you start to become honest with your own gaps.
Yeah.
And it's humbling. It kind of like breaks down that Pharisaic self-righteousness that I know I have within me, and shifts my focus not so much on like condemning people, because I can see so clearly the gaps in your life. And my prayer changes to pray for them, but to also ask the Lord to help me deal with my own gaps.
Yeah.
So
It's almost like the genuineness of the church life reflects deeply into your prayer life, and the genuineness of your prayer life also refers back to your life with the
100%.
church.
Yeah.
Like you can't be one without the other, because you can try to act cool at church, and you can't because your prayer also wasn't as deep. Maybe it wasn't you weren't praying with the right heart and the right attitude, even the right humility. Like you're just asking for things. I pray all the time, but your prayer wasn't for God to change you. And that's why we're like this at church, or we're like this with fellowship in community. And I think the same way also, the deeper our walk with God, the more genuine and accountable, authentic, and accepting we can be towards each other, which is always going back to the gospel. Even Pastor Edwin will remind us, we always need the gospel. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, every morning, every just preaching, time of preaching, just fellowshipping. I can't do this apart from the gospel, which I can't do this apart from God first, encountering God first. So, good stuff. Let's talk a little bit about the huddle, because in our church, in many churches, their slogan is, "We're not just a church with small groups." Correct me if I'm wrong. We're a church of small groups. So why is that important, and what does that even mean?
Okay, like that word makes a difference, because if you're saying that you were a church with small groups, it kind of lessens the significance of small groups in our discipleship path. But a church of small groups means it's very much central, right? Right.
Yeah, it's
right. Yeah.
it's the heartbeat of
Yeah.
of Pinnacle Village.
Yeah.
Huddles. The pandemic, I know, had allowed us to recalibrate our hearts,
Right.
and realize, as with everybody during the pandemic, right? We realized
definitely.
relationships are so important. So I love that phrasing. We are not a church with small groups. We're a church of small groups.
Yes, and I would add another thing about the mission of the church, and the mission of following Jesus. He would say, "Go and make disciples," and I kind of forgot about that. But discipleship, that discipleship is central to following Jesus. That we're not called to just listen to Jesus, be fans of Jesus. We're called to be disciples of Jesus. Yeah. So in that sense, we also make other disciples. And that can happen. That can only happen in a very personal, intimate way, because how you can't be a disciple in a crowd of 300 people. It's not enough.
Yeah.
Like, the pastor sharing on a Sunday pulpit, maybe speaking to you, but you also need to express with a group of people, in a smaller setting, of what you're really going through, and even talking to a pastor, and even talking to a mentor or a huddle guide. So huddle is also just as important, and that's how we express discipleship. Here at Pinnacle Village.
I share a personal experience. I've had a number of times where I did not want to do huddle, or did not want to meet up, and I'm sure everybody listening
Yeah,
could
we
probably,
had
yeah, right.
I
We
can
we have
relate.
we can relate big time. But I do know that during the times that I did still need to meet up, and I'm so glad that I did, because after our huddle, after our discussion, I found myself saying, "Man, thank God we did do this discussion, because otherwise I would have missed a lot on what they had said and what the people had shared and said during that time. They were just so rich.
Mm.
It was just so full of a lot of insights that were very helpful to me personally. And I realized if I did not push through with that huddle, if I like, oh, let's cancel, let's meet another time, and
Yeah.
I would have missed out on so much. So huddle, small groups, definitely God uses for growth, for maturity, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I remember my first time, not the first time, but my early experience with Huddle as a just a member. Just in, I think I was still in high school. I was in high school because I was working in IKEA. For those who didn't
Oh,
know, I was a senior in high school. It was after Sunday because I had work on Sunday and I had to. There was a huddle and I was like, should I go? I'm gonna go to work anyway, so maybe I shouldn't. But I went. I was dressed in my uniform, uniform, and attended. And I remember it was like a very powerful moment where, yes, I just came from a Sunday and I thought that's enough. You know,
mm,
I came from a service, so it should be good. But sitting down in a huddle, because at the time I think I was going through college admissions. So it was just like, oh, which is around this time for those who are listening.
mm.
And I was just like, what do I do? Like, what am I doing with my life? And I remember a passage. It was at the Cherry. That was our huddle guide, and she was sharing 2 Corinthians 4. We have all this in jars of clay. That's why we don't give up. We do not lose heart.
Mm.
And I remember just taking that to heart and feeling really encouraged. And as I was sharing, this is actually what I'm going through. I don't know. I have uncertainties in my life. I don't know where to apply. I don't know what I want to do with my life. But it was in that moment of just sharing my struggles that I just was received encouragement personally from people face to face, not just from a pastor and on a pulpit our pastors know our names here, but imagine just attending a church, you're just a face in the crowd. Yes, the Lord will speak to you, but it's so much more meaningful and it's so much more memorable. I remember that moment because I know the faces, I know the people that were there
Yeah.
that spoke to me. So that was a very powerful moment that I remember about Huddle.
Nice.
Mm, maybe my struggle with Huddle, I think this is kind of the theme I'm seeing, like listening to both of your stories of how sometimes you think that it's enough to attend Sunday service and not sit down and have conversations with people in a smaller setting and share your struggles in that context. Or
But you told me you didn't have any struggles.
oh,
I'm just kidding.
I definitely did. Like maybe for you, Josh, like
Zero struggle.
you
Yeah,
know, I did,
exactly,
I
right?
did. I think I was definitely reflecting if yours was more of like sometimes you didn't really see like the point of it because you got like bored. I think mine was more of like, admittedly, I understood that I needed a huddle here, but I was afraid. I was afraid of being vulnerable. I was afraid. So my mindset, it actually took me a lot of time to get to a place where, and I'd like to believe I'm still working on that, where you're so secure in who you are in God that neither your successes or your failures like hit your identity anymore. And I think I'm still far from that. I have a lot of work to do. But I think in those moments where you're openly able to talk about your failures in real time, I guess there's a difference between talking about what you're going through, but it's already after the fact and you're sharing that story because pokey points. I think you know Pogi Points, right?
Brownie points, right?
Yeah.
Is that the English translation?
Yeah, Pogi
Yeah.
Points is like you want to look cool as you're telling the story of how you overcame. But the problem was you just kind of tried to deal with it on your own versus like I think that test that I have for myself personally is like in real time.
Yes, yes.
You're in
yes.
the middle of it and you can say that these people are your safe space and they may not agree with everything you're saying, which is good because accountability means the willingness to be corrected and for people to give you a perspective that will potentially challenge a perspective that you've already decided on. And you're coming and you're hearing someone else say, actually, you're not looking at it in the right way, or it's not wise the way you're thinking about it. And that hits ego and that hits, no, like, what are you talking about? This is my life. Like that mindset of like, why should you be a voice and your words to have weight on my life? So that self-centeredness, that hubris, that ego and that pride that keeps us from accepting correction openly and humbly and willingly. So I think like growing up, I was really afraid of opening up because I was afraid of the perspectives I would hear if my character was strong enough to take it, where the end result would not be me crumbling down because of my insecurities. Or I just felt like if I tell you what I'm going through, I'm just going to burden you. Like I had that weird mindset of like, people have problems that they're going through already. Like, why should I add to theirs? And I guess like my problem was not so much not understanding that I needed Huddle. It was, I was afraid. And I had to come to a point in my journey where what was I more afraid of? My fear of staying the same versus my fear of growth and change. Sorry, let me rephrase that. Which pain was going to be more painful? The pain of staying the same or the pain of growth? And I think the only time that I knew I was able to hurdle that was when the pain of staying the same was more. I was like, I don't think I could stay like this. I wish I had learned how to be more open to people at an earlier age. It's what I tell our young people all the time. But I understand it's a process and it takes time. And it sounds cliche until you're actually in it, which is why I think I could speak about it from conviction. So I think if I'm going to kind of just chime in on like my struggles with Huddle, I think that's definitely where it was hard for me.
Thank you once again for watching or listening to our brand new podcast. Know that all the messages on the Followers course is available on our website at pinnaclevillage.org. And if you enjoy listening, be sure to like, subscribe, follow, share with a friend or a family member on whatever platforms you enjoy listening from, whether that is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, on YouTube. Once again, thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.